really was a worldwide flood, what would the evidence be? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down the water all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down the water all over the earth. Well, there really was a worldwide flood.
Welcome to Creation Foundation, where we discuss the biblical worldview and the evidences for it. Also, the implications that will affect your thinking and your life. I'm Dick Temple.
And I'm Mark Finkbeiner.
And I'm Greg Morgan.
Today we're going to be discussing field geology as it relates to the global flood and the geologic column. And field geology is a study of what's actually there. If field geology matches up with the geologic column, then we as Christians have a problem. If field geology matches up with the global flood, the evolutionists have one more enigma to add to their long list. So that, first of all, let's discuss what is the geologic column. This was put together by a man named Charles Lyell in the 1800s. He was building on the work of James Hutton and also on the work of William Smith. William Smith was a creationist who discovered that certain types of sedimentary rock contained certain types of fossils, and these fossils were fairly consistent in the different types of rock. So he began the study of stratigraphy. In other words, the various strata of soil. So what Charles Lyell did was he said, well, everything was laid down over long periods of time and one layer was built on another. So he put an order to each of the layers of sedimentary rock, and he assigned an index fossil to each of these layers of sedimentary rock. The index fossil being a fossil, some creature or plant or animal that supposedly went extinct during that time period, so that if that particular fossil were found in a layer, it had to be at least a certain age or older. Well, there's been some problems with this in that many of the fossils he assigned turned out to be still alive today, which is where we get the term living fossil. Then another problem is there are over 500 places on Earth where there are hundreds of square miles where the so-called oldest layer is on top of the so-called youngest layer. However, the geologic column has stood the test of time, not because it's consistent with field geology, but because it's consistent with the humanist worldview. Therefore, it is the one propagated today pretty well worldwide. Now, on the other hand, the field geology that would relate to the global flood would be something that would involve what we call catastrophism. In other words, things happen very rapidly. The entire sedimentary layers across the Earth, which cover about 3/4 of the Earth's surface, would have been laid down at the time of the global flood. Much of the sedimentary rock would actually have been formed, first ground up into the small pieces of sand or smaller particles, and then laid down. The sedimentary rock can form very fast because the way the sedimentary rock forms is that there are minerals in the water that lays the layers down, and when these minerals dry out, they act like glue and form the rock. So as we look at the two possibilities of what we should find in real field geology, we can decide, is the global flood true or is the geologic column true? And with the studies you've done, Mark, what would your comments be on this?
I just want to review just a little bit part one of this program. You remember I was talking about the octopuses that were found in Lebanon, the 5 of them? Well, the interesting thing is, and I really want to drive this point home, is that the evolutionists are saying that these octopuses are 95 million years old. Well, they look just like the octopuses that are alive today. I guess those octopuses forgot to evolve. The other problem is that these octopuses were laid down in limestone. Now, the evolutionists will tell you that it took millions of years for limestone to be laid down. Well, then there's something wrong then with their humanistic worldview that would lead them to believe that it takes millions of years for limestone to be laid down to where it can cover up a 95 million year old octopus. Okay? Well, everybody knows that has two brain cells knocking together, knows that an octopus is very soft, very slimy, and if it lays out in the open for very long, it's just going to start to deteriorate. So this proves that the limestone could not be millions of years old. It couldn't have taken millions of years for that limestone to have laid down to slowly cover over the octopuses. Okay? And so this is more evidence again that this limestone, it covered the octopus rapidly.
Doesn't limestone, isn't it laid down by a factor of the minerals in the water plus a change in the water temperature that causes the limestone to be laid down? So limestone would naturally be laid down fairly quickly with a change of currents which change the temperature of the water. Isn't that what we would expect to see? So anytime you get limestone laid down, it would have to be laid down quickly?
Right, it would have to be. And the other thing that's interesting too about limestone is that there's two kinds. There's organic and inorganic limestone, but most of the limestone that we see is organic, and it actually comes from seashells. And that's another thing that's really amazing. It actually comes from living things. And so if you've got this limestone that's slowly, they say that slowly covered over this octopus, and the octopus is 95 million years old, well, you think about the catastrophism then that's going on to convert this limestone from something that is organic to something that is dead, to turn it into something that is soft, to cover over the octopuses. This is horrendous catastrophism that's going on here. Okay? I mean, this is amazing. And then to think of the fact that they actually found ink. They actually found ink, and they could actually write with it. Now, you can look this documentation up. I've got it all, and you can contact me if you want to see more of this documentation. But they actually found the ink in the fossil, and they could actually write with it. Okay? All right. Then also, I wanted to bring up again the fish fossil. You know, years ago, I took geology in college. And I went to the college professor and I says, have you ever seen the fossils of one fish swallowing another fish? And she says, no. And see, here's the thing. Here's a teacher in a government school, PhD, and I had no degree, and I knew about the fish swallowing another fish. I'm thinking, what? Don't these people ever get out and really study things that are out there? Don't they get out into the field and study? Why, I have picture after picture after picture of one fish swallowing another fish. And it's not even all that uncommon. It's all over the world. They find these kinds of fossils all over the world, which is amazing. And so that proves rapid burial right there. I mean, just think of it. One fish swallowing another fish, that's like taking a picture and freeze framing it. So in other words, this one fish that was minding its own business, having dinner, didn't even see the flood coming, didn't even see that mud coming, and it just came in, boom, like that, and just covered it instantly. The fish had no time to react. And you take a look at those pictures, and you should be able to see them on the screen here. You can see the gills, you can see the fins. The fins are extracted. They have not relaxed like a fish would if it just died. Okay? So anyway, I just think that is so fascinating. Also, we found there's another great find, and these are jellyfish that were found in Wisconsin a number of years back. Now, jellyfish are just as soft and even softer than octopuses. Now, like I said, this is not an isolated condition. We find this evidence all over the world of rapid burial. So we find these jellyfish in a sandstone quarry in Wisconsin. Jellyfish, they have no skeleton, they have no hard parts whatsoever. So therefore, if a jellyfish dies, it has to be buried rapidly. Otherwise, you're not going to get a fossil out of it. But I have pictures here of fossilized jellyfish, and not only are they fossilized, but they're fossilized in ripple marks. Okay, so here you have the ripple marks, and you also have the jellyfish with the ripple marks. And guess what? They're even subscribing, they're even saying that these jellyfish lived 500 500 million years ago. Well, you look at the jellyfish in these fossils compared to the jellyfish today, oh, I guess they forgot to evolve as well. And here's what the evolutionists are saying. This is what they say. They say this, and I have the documentation. It says, what a storm it must have been. News reports said that hundreds of giant jellyfish once lived about 500 million years ago, but were stranded by a freakish, get that, freakish tide or storm on an ancient beach. Yes, they always say that, ancient beach, you know, a shallow ocean or something like that. Sand, and then, get this, sand later buried them, forming fossils. Sand later buried them? What, a day, a million years? The jellyfish should be gone. You see, like I said before in program number 1, if it's common sense, it's probably true. This is not common sense here, okay? And so then they say jellyfish hoard uncovered after 500 million years. Well, I guess the jellyfish forgot to evolve because it didn't change in all those years. Preservation of a soft-bodied organism is incredibly rare, but a whole deposit of them is like finding your own vein of gold, said James Hagedorn, probably destroying his name, Hagedorn, one of the paleontologists who reported the find. And you know, it doesn't have to be incredible if you put all of this in alignment with a worldwide flood. A worldwide flood then describes it. It's not that difficult to figure it out. And then it says here, jellyfish are essentially floaters. See, jellyfish, they float up on top of the water. Okay, so how did jellyfish get buried? Well, it makes more sense when you look at it from a worldwide flood standpoint. So in other words, these jellyfish, they got filled up with silt, sand, and mud into their stomachs. Okay? The bell pumping action of jellyfish would have pumped silt, sand, and mud into their stomachs and internal cavities, and as their sediment load increased, they would have progressively sunk to the seabed. Okay, that's the only way you could have got these organisms to sink, was with them actually sucking up a lot of sand, mud, and silt, because they live up on top of the water. So this is more evidence, once again, of a worldwide flood sinking these jellyfish and then fossilizing them. They were also found with sand ripples. Then 80 whales. Here's another thing. 80 whales were buried. They were buried mysteriously in the Chilean desert. A marine graveyard is evidence of Noah's flood. So you have 80 whales that were buried in the Chilean desert. This was a remarkable bone bed find on the west coast of northern Chile. Now this was about 440 miles north of the capital of Santiago. Okay, so you got these 80 whales buried, and 20 of them were buried perfectly. I mean, the whole whale was there, and we find fossil whales buried on top of each other, which is amazing. And get this, this was in the desert. Okay, so what in the world are we finding 80 whales buried in the desert in Chile? Okay, now you think about that. So this again describes a condition that was much different a long time ago, where you had this worldwide flood and it buried these whales instantly to preserve them so perfectly like they were. Okay, and then guess what? We have another find. 300 whales, porpoises, turtles, and seals, fish, and other animals, ground sloths, and penguins, and they were all buried together in Peru. Now, isn't that amazing? Okay, so again, this is a huge deathbed, bone bed, where all these animals, all these organisms were buried rapidly once again in a worldwide flood, and they found this south of Lima, Peru. Okay, Greg.
I was doing a little bit of exploring. Field geology really is exploring places. And I was exploring with 3 of my brothers, none of us geologists. I'm an engineer, for those who are interested. But we were walking along outside Tucumcari, New Mexico, enjoying the scenery, and I noticed this little thing. A nice little rock with these lumps on the surface of it and covered with something often called caliche. And I thought that that looked something like what's called a coprolite. Now, many people don't know what that means. Coprolite is petrified dinosaur droppings. Dinosaur walked along, had its droppings, and somehow the dropping was turned into rock. Well, I brought these back and had a local geologist take a look at them, and he said, no, those are just basalt nodules. Now, they didn't really look like basalt nodules to me, but I wasn't able to break them open and see what was inside them, and so I tossed them into a gravel bed, and over a period of years, several of them did get chipped, and they exposed some different layers. And here we find an impression of bark, and we find another impression of bark, and some more impression of bark. But interestingly, there's also some impressions of straw and grass in this. And so it's not a basalt nodule. This truly is a coprolite, which is a petrified dinosaur dropping. Now, you could argue that it might be a moose dropping instead, though that's not going to make much difference for our purposes. Because it was found in Tucumcari, New Mexico, where there are a lot of dinosaur fossils found, including hadrosaurs and other things that ate plants, we know that it is almost certainly a dinosaur dropping. Beautiful little straw impressions in here, including, you can see that the straw was hollow. And what this does, and its companion here, which isn't quite the quality, but it still has clearly a coprolite. What does this say about conventional geology versus field geology and the global flood? Well, when people walk around North America, we never find fossilized buffalo droppings, and we never find fossilized buffalo. Some 80 million bison have died, and many of them were, the hunters took the hide and the tongue and left the rest of it there, but none of them got fossilized. And none of their droppings got fossilized. Well, why not? Well, because in order to fossilize, especially a dropping, it has to be buried very rapidly and very deep, so deep that it kills the bacteria that was in it, and no scavengers are able to get to it to return it to the ecology. So this right here is evidence for a very rapid burial, and if you go on the internet, you'll find that this stuff sells for $2 to $5 a pound, and that means that it's actually quite common. So why would you have commonly found a bunch of petrified dinosaur droppings? Well, because there are a lot of them, and the only way you can get a lot of them is for there to have been something very catastrophic that buried a huge number of these things very deeply. Now that's consistent with a global flood. It's not consistent with a uniformitarian or the humanist philosophy of everything has been the same. One of my geology professors gave a very quick and easy definition of field geology. He said, look at the road cuts. The highway departments of this country have spent billions of dollars digging down through hills so we could place roads there. Well, as you drive along, watch the road cuts. You will find not just, you can find these occasionally in road cuts, and as I showed in the previous episode, you'll find petrified wood in road cuts, but you'll also find that the layers of rock are nicely curved. If they had gotten that curve in them while they were rock, it would have been lifted up and it would have broken. But go through the road cuts, you won't find broken rock in it, except broken by the explosions as they made the road cut. So we just need to open our eyes. Now, I was very fortunate that I knew something about what a coprolite looked like, and therefore I picked this up and wish I had believe myself more than I believe that geologist. But open your eyes, look in road cuts, look wherever you are for things that might be unusual, and it's amazing what you'll find. And everything that I can find is consistent with biblical creation, and it's very inconsistent with a humanist viewpoint. Dick?
Yeah, I'd like to come back to something you said, Mark.
Sure.
You talked about speaking with a teacher
Yeah.
who had not seen the fish that was in the act of swallowing another fish, the fossilized fish. Also we have fish that were in the process of giving birth. The sudden snapshot in time when the sudden muddy water come rolling over and buried it. Now the thing is that stands out here is whenever you're talking about evolution, the thing that brings it back to the evidence for creation is the rest of the story. The teacher only had part of the story.
That's right.
And this happens over and over again. And I had an incident I'd like to share with you that I thought was rather humorous. I was practicing veterinary medicine in Circle, Montana, and a school teacher from Glendive, Montana brought her pet in. I don't remember now if it was a dog or a cat. And she asked me, are the dew claws evolving on or off of the dog, of this pet? And I did kind of like you're doing, Mark. I kind of laughed. And I said, neither one. Nothing evolves in geology, nothing evolves in biology but theories. Well, that just set her off. I mean, she just kind of exploded all over the place, and she started to try to convert me to evolution. And all she had was the textbook stuff. She would give me information from the textbook. They'll say radiometric dating. Well, I'd tell her how radiometric dating works. She'd talk about the geologic column. I'd explain geologic column. She'd talk about evolutionary processes from one form to another, and I would discuss the lack of the transitional forms, the fact that it's consistent, the DNA is consistent, that you don't have anything that goes from simple to complex. All mutations are either horizontal or downhill. I mean, this went on for 20 minutes. I had an office full of people waiting for me. And she just kept going, and I just kept knocking it down. And finally, she ran out of information. And so then she said, well, I don't think anyone has a right to try to
Convert?
Yeah, convert someone else. She just spent 20 minutes with people waiting in the office. But she couldn't see. Oh, no, it was to force their views on anyone else. That was the term she used. I don't think anyone has a right to try to force their views onto anyone else. I found it so funny, I didn't even answer it. I just sent her on her way. But this is what happens in the real world. All you have to do when discussing creation and evolution as a creationist is tell the rest of the story. And today we have all kinds of resources. The problem is you can't just go down to your Bible bookstore and find the good information. And sometimes you need to go to places like the creationist websites. You just cannot get some of the really good creation science books into a bookstore. So you need to go to sources where you can get it. Now, for instance, here's a book, Creation Geology, that's very simple. It's meant for kids, so it works real good for guys like me who are not geologists. Greg, you had some information that you brought with you, that resources that could be of value to people.
Yes, indeed. For people who want a general view of the creation evolution question, you can go to Answers magazine. And this is put out from Answers in Genesis. Some of you know who Ken Ham is. And this is a very good magazine. It is for high school graduates and for just about everybody, actually. It includes a kids section in every issue of it. For those of you who want something a little bit more technical, there's the Creation Quarterly. The Creation Research Society publishes a quarterly magazine, and some of the articles are over my head, but for those who are interested in that field, it should be a very good way to get some technical answers to questions you may have. We can also go to things like this one, which I hope they will still have in print and is still available some places. It's called In 6 Days, and it's a book where 50 scientists, all with PhD level degrees, have written their view of why they believe that the Earth was created in 6 days. There was a follow-on book, and it's interesting to me that here we have lots of PhD scientists who believe this, and yet the evolutionists will claim that no PhD scientists believe it. Well, get the book. You'll find what the truth is. You'll find the rest of the story, including you'll find that some of these have been discriminated against on their job because they believe in a recent creation, they believe in biblical creation. And that's one of the most insidious things about all this, is that people get discriminated against because of their beliefs about whether we have a recent creation or ancient creation. I don't believe that either group should be discriminated against. We should talk with one another and not just talk at one another. So there's lots of information available out there, and the scroll on this program has several of the addresses you can go to get further information.
Mark?
You know, to go along with what you were saying, you know, you got to tell the whole story. I like this old saying, and it goes like this. It's what you learn after you know it all is what counts. And you know, you get around some of these people that believe evolution, and you'll find that all that they know is what they've been taught in school. They have textbook answers, and their thinking does not go out this way. It's almost like they have tunnel vision, is what they've got. And so you try to teach them something, you try to show them some new evidence, like those fish fossils, you know, where one fish is swallowing another fish. Or you try to tell them about how oil is formed and how quickly it can be formed. You know, and it's like it just goes through one ear and out the other, because if they weren't taught it in the government schools, well, then it can't be true, because they can only think one way, you know, tunnel vision. And you know, oil can be formed in a matter of minutes. All you got to do is squish something hard enough, you get the oil out of it. It doesn't take millions of years, and that's provable.
And a national laboratory in Richland, Washington, created fossils in as little as 24 hours. Now those are pretty special conditions, but that does show that's what it takes, is the right conditions, and you can form fossils rapidly.
Well, we here at Creation Foundations would like for you to have the rest of the story. And we may not be covering the things that are the most important to you, the questions that you have. So if you would like to contact the television station here, KRLB, with a question that you would like us to cover on this program, we would be happy to give you the information. What we would like to do is give you the rest of the story.
The Bible talks about a worldwide flood, of a worldwide flood, of a worldwide flood. If there really was a worldwide flood, what would the evidence be? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down the water all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down the water all over the earth. Well, there really was a worldwide flood. Just look at the stony curse, with billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down the water all over the earth. The Bible talks about Noah and the ark in a worldwide flood, where the world was judged. If there really was a worldwide flood, what would the evidence be? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down the water all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down the water all over the earth. Well, there really was a worldwide flood. Just look at the stony curse, with billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down the water all over the earth. The Bible talks about a worldwide flood. Could the fossils be the proof we see? If there really was a worldwide flood, what would the evidence be? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down the water all over the earth.